Now, this afternoon, I sat down with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker to talk about what is happening on the ground, what he's seeing, what he knows, what tools he has to fight back, and what Trump's ultimate goal is. Governor Pritzker, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. I really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So as we sit here today, there are visible preparations in Chicago, including fencing near the downtown buildings and Homeland Security vehicles set up. One of the challenges you've talked about is the lack of communication from the president and from the White House about what exactly they're preparing. Have you heard anything more directly from them?
No, which is shocking, really. The federal government not communicating with state government about what is supposed to be a law enforcement action by them. That's unheard of, really. And I've been governor since the Trump first term and through the Biden term and now in this term. And I've never seen anything like this. And frankly, the former governors that I've talked to, Republicans and Democrats in Illinois have said they haven't seen anything like this either. So it's a kind of a frightening development in the history of the country that you have a federal government not communicating with state government about something like this.
As much as they're saying things on television, which is what people are hearing. There's been reports that they have been in touch at some level with local police or local law enforcement. What are you preparing for in terms of the scope of this?
Well, we did get one call finally. This is after weeks of Donald Trump threatening and saying he's sending troops in and not telling us exactly what their plan is. But we got one call from this fellow, Gregory Bovino, who's a leader at Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. And he's the one who caused a lot of the mayhem in Los Angeles. He is apparently leading the effort to come into Chicago. And he called our state police and let us know, let our state police director know only that they are coming and that they intend to be in place by the end of this week. And that's it. They didn't tell us how many. They didn't tell us what actions they're going to take. They didn't tell us what neighborhoods. Remember, we have local law enforcement here who are responsible for keeping the peace, making sure that we're operating at a appropriate level to keep crime down, and to have people roaming the streets, wearing uniforms, and arresting people off the streets, wearing masks and driving their military-like vehicles and tossing people in. And that's incredibly disruptive. Yeah. And if they would just let us know, Chicago police, Illinois State Police, where they're going, what time they're going. I mean, we are obligated not to stand in the way, also not to assist, but we also can be of assistance to the residents by keeping them safe while these operations are going on. And again, no communication at all, and especially, of course, on the subject of whether they're going to send National Guard from another state or from my state into neighborhoods in Chicago.
There's also what seems one of the challenges also seems like there's multiple operations they seem to be preparing, at least from what they're saying publicly. There's also been reporting that the Defense Department has approved using a nearby naval base north of the city as a staging area for ICE. So that is not separate. It's all connected, and possibly to have that as a place where federal troops are. Do you have any sense even of the scope of the ICE operation that they're planning?
Not from ICE. We're getting, again, it's all secondhand, third hand. There are a lot of patriotic Americans who work in the administration or work at the departments or in the military who have let us know things without having permission to do so. And so I would call some of that rumor, but well-sourced rumors. We also know because Great Lakes Naval Base, which is where they're stationing themselves, is in North Chicago, and so the North Chicago local police and local elected officials have at least some information. So, look, I don't have a lot to share with the public. Whatever I have heard, I have shared with the public, because I think everybody should know, despite the fact the federal government would like them not to know, apparently. So we think there are about 300 agents that may be at Great Lakes and preparing to invade the communities around Chicago, like Little Village, like Pilsen, perhaps beginning early morning tomorrow.
This feels a lot to me like the playbook they followed in LA, where they are upping or have plans seemingly to up their ICE operations, go into communities, go after and arrest people without criminal records, prompt people to protest, which is something we saw in LA, and then claim it is some sort of security threat that prompts military being in the streets. Do you see it as a playbook they're following? Is that what you're preparing for here?
It's, I believe, a nefarious plan. It's one that's been repeated over and over again by, well, tyrannical dictatorships across history, where you try to incite local population into some mayhem by sending in police or other disruptors, and then claim that there's too much mayhem on the ground, and therefore there must be troops that are sent in, and that's how you basically convert a democracy into something other than that. And so that is what really worries me here. And look, we've already seen it. LA, they did do it in LA exactly that way, but that wasn't new to anybody, at least, again, if you look throughout history. And of course, Washington, D.C., where I know the president and Congress has control of the federal district, so they can do whatever they want, but it is illegal. What they're suggesting that they're going to do is illegal. And we're ready to go to court when they kind of trip the wire, so to speak. And there's been an incident that allows us to do that as soon as we can. And so that's all we have, though. Remember, if the courts don't rule, in favor of posse comitatus, that's an act that prevents, supposedly, the federal government from sending troops into a state to do law enforcement. If they don't enforce that or understand that what Trump is doing is unconstitutional, then we're then at the whims of a fighting force that they're planning to send here. Remember, the people that they're talking about sending in, these military troops, are trained for war. They're not trained for, crowd control. They're not trained to fight crime. They're not trained to arrest people the way that local police are, that local and civilian law enforcement are trained to do those things. And so that's why I've said, look, if Donald Trump wants to help us as we're fighting crime, by the way, we've done a terrific job on the ground here. The last 4 years, we've seen homicides drop in half. We've seen virtually every measure of violent crime drop by double digits. If they want to help us to continue that trend, why not help us with providing ATF, right? The people who can help us interdict firearms that are coming from every state around us has weak or no limitations on firearms. And indeed, more than half of the guns that are used in the state of Illinois come from states around us, not from our state. So why don't you help us with ATF agents who already work with us on the ground, but we could use more. FBI, DEA, we're fighting gangs, we're fighting drugs. That happens in every major city. If you want to help us fight crime, send us civilian law enforcement.
There are ways to fight crime. I mean, the statistic I've seen, and you can check me because you're the governor, is that 84% of homicides in Chicago involve a firearm, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone. As you mentioned, there's an influx of guns that come over from the state of Indiana, where the gun laws are not as strong as they are in the state of Illinois. So there are things that can be done if you were actually trying to address crime. I want to just go back to something you said about the National Guard, because this is something that other leaders have mentioned as a big challenge. I mean, the National Guard are not trained. They're trained to be in war zones. They're not trained to be fighting crime or patrolling cities or communities. You've said that the Philadelphia DA has also said that if they come in and they violate the law, that they will be prosecuted or you will go after them. What does that look like? How do you even enforce that? Is that local police or local law enforcement tracking what the National Guard is doing, or what do you envision there?
Well, let's start with, we can't, as I'm talking about the state or the city officials or law enforcement, we can't track what every one of the ICE officials and officers are doing on the ground. So we've asked the public. I've been very explicit about this. People in neighborhoods, they don't want these ICE officials, and they don't want troops on the ground. And so what we've asked is that people pull out their iPhone or their Android phone and film what they're seeing. take a video of everything that you see so that we can know if, in fact, laws are being broken by these federal officials coming into our state. They're not allowed to do certain things. They're not allowed, for example, with their administrative warrants, to break down a door to find somebody. They're just not. An administrative warrant doesn't give you that ability. If you want to go get a judicial warrant, which they can't because they don't have enough evidence that will allow a judge to make that determination for most of these situations, then we would abide by a judicial warrant. At least a court will have heard it. There will have been lawyers involved in helping to make the decision. But no, this is just an administrative warrant written up by essentially a police officer who decided, an ICE officer who's decided, I want to go after that house or that person or that family, and they get to just write it themselves with no oversight. So this is the challenge, and I think we need the public to be involved in monitoring that, and we're making sure that we're also asking the public, because they know they're going to protest, we're asking them to be peaceful in that protest, to make sure that they're doing they're making their voices heard, they're using their megaphones and microphones, but that they stay out of the way of these ICE officials.
In terms of the National Guard, I mean, you've said that you don't have the authority to override federal orders as it relates to the National Guard from your state. It's possible, and there have been reports that there could be a consideration of calling up National Guard from Texas, say, or other states, red states that might be more inclined to listen to President Trump, to put it diplomatically. Is that something where you would have any other legal authority or additional ability or capacity to take action to prevent those National Guard from other states from coming, or does it apply in the same way?
Unfortunately, any National Guard from any state that is federalized now becomes like a military troop. They are not allowed to do law enforcement. They can come into the city, but they are restricted essentially to federal buildings, protecting federal buildings. If that's what they intend to do, that is legal. But they're not allowed to simply come into the neighborhoods and start, imposing their will. There are laws against this. There is, in fact, unless there's some sort of insurrection, which there is clearly not, or an attack on the United States coming from a city, then these troops are not allowed to do anything other than protect those federal buildings. But he's looking for an excuse. And the excuse that Donald Trump is looking for is, well, there have been protesters who are interfering with the execution of the ICE officers' duties. And that there may be somebody who shoves somebody or, is put in a situation where it looks like they're committing some sort of assault. And then they'll point at that. Donald Trump will point at that and say, well, clearly we need to protect the ICE officers, so we're going to have to use federal force. It's a pretense. We know what it's about, and it has nothing to do with fighting crime. And it has, honestly, sending National Guard in has nothing to do with immigration either. What it has to do with is he's trying to set the stage for interference in the elections in 2026 and in 2028.
I know you've made that point before, and that made my ears perk up, and it should be alarming to anyone. What does that look like? Because it sounds like you're saying there's going to be military in the streets that are going to prevent people from participating in the elections. Is that it, or it's something else?
It could be that. It also could be claiming that there's something wrong with the election results or the counting of ballots, so they're going to take control of the ballot boxes. And why do I say this? I mean, why do I suspect that that's in fact what they're doing? Well, look at the history here. Donald Trump encouraged people to be part of a Stop the Steal movement in 2020. When he lost the election, he then went out and fomented engagement in this activity to deny the election, and then fomented the January 6th protesters to do what they did, which is attack the Capitol. And then he pardoned them after they were found to have committed criminal acts. And then let's fast forward to today. He's back in office, and he's talking about maybe people would like a dictatorship. He's said that publicly. I mean, that's out loud. You can go look at it. What about his entreaty that, that he believes he's just making things up in his head that there is fraud going on that has helped to elect people to office. They just recently asked for all of the records of people who voted in Illinois. They want all of the records. Imagine all your private information if you're an Illinois resident who is registered to vote. And they're going to find your home address, perhaps your phone number, your registration, or how you voted last time. This is all what's being requested by the Department of Justice. Think about all those things together. What is the purpose of all of that, if not to focus on interfering with the 2026 elections, which clearly he knows he's going to lose? How do we know that? Because now he's asking states to do a mid-decade redistricting. He went to Texas to try to get them to do it. They've now done it. Now he's going to Missouri and Indiana and other states to get them to do it. And, we have to stand up and make sure that we're focusing on what the real aims are, and that is to thwart the elections, to give him more power.
You have never held back in speaking out against Trump and calling out what he's trying to do. There are also limitations even within our court system, because even as it relates to the actions of the National Guard, I mean, if you look at California, it's taken months and they're still in sort of the status quo. If they try to keep military on the streets, if they try to use it to prevent people from participating in the process, what are the options at your disposal as governor to do beyond working through the court system?
Well, we're focused on following the law, and we do rely upon the court system. California is a good example. There was a case that was just decided that, in fact, disallows, called illegal and unconstitutional, what Donald Trump did with National Guard in California. That should hold for Illinois also. Now, again, the Supreme Court has said that, one jurisdiction that makes a decision doesn't have any holding or effect on another until it's decided there. So we'll have to go get that decision here. But it's clear that, anybody looking at the law, looking at the Constitution, would find it unconstitutional.
Have you been in touch? I know you talked to Governor Newsom and other governors. He's been through this before, a version of this. Have you asked him what he would have done differently? My
team has been in direct contact with our attorney generals, talked to their attorney general. I haven't spoken with Gavin about this, but we have a good relationship. And the truth is that we've seen what their playbook was, that is to fight Donald Trump in California, to push back, and we know what that is. We think we have the same options and maybe a few others. But it is important that the American public understands what's going on here writ large. This is a nefarious endeavor that he's going into blue states, blue cities. You don't see any activity in a Republican state or a Republican city. And yet, when he says it's all about crime, those Republican states have higher crime rates. Those Republican cities have higher crime rates. So, this isn't about that. We should know that, and the public should know that. And I think slowly but surely, elected officials, Democrats, starting with Democrats, and the public are starting to see that they're going to have to stand up and speak out and push back.
Governor Pritzker, I know you have a lot going on in your state right now. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me.
Great to see you.